Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, New Zealand, Australia, and welcome to AI in Marketing. Welcome to this 45-minute session with BOMA, the marketing platform that the Gap integrates with. I'm Viv Brownrigg, one of the founders and directors here at the Gap, and I'll make some intros in a moment. But before I do, just a little bit of sensible housekeeping. By all means, throw some questions into the chat pane as you go, some comments, whatever. We will do a roundup of those questions towards the end of the session so that I don't interrupt Charles and Andy's flow. But by all means, ask the questions as you think of them, and we'll get a good 10-15 minutes at the end. So that's often when the gold comes. So pretty simple stuff, no more rules apart from that. I've already introduced myself. I really want to intro Charles Clark, who's Marketing Director at BOMA, and Andy Baird, who is Head of Engineering. So the great thing about today is Andy is going to be showing you some very new and very exciting product innovation that BOMA have released in the field of AI, which is grabbing everyone's attention right now. So let's get underway. I don't think there's too many other rules we need to be worrying about, and I'm really just going to hand over to Charles now to take us through just what's been happening in the AI marketing world before we hand over to Andy. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, Viv, and likewise, thanks for everyone for dialing in for today's session. I'll get right into it. And I think before we sort of talk about specifics of AI, it is seen as a really game-changing technology and potential disruptor to a lot of industries. So it might be worth just getting some context and looking back at some other game-changing in their time technologies to give us a bit of a sense of context and maybe dampen down some of maybe the high highs or expectations we have for it, but also some of maybe the fears or anxieties we have as well. So looking all the way back to those long old days of the 1970s, and personal computers were around, but it wasn't until sort of 1980, 81 that they became to be mass adopted. And this was really kicked off by IBM's PC launch. And that was really a new era where individuals and small businesses could suddenly access this technology and enable them to perform tasks faster, more efficiency, and obviously led to the development and uptake of many subsequent technologies that are actually on this timeline. Next, slightly out of left field, was a shift from traditional 35mm film to digital video. Now, this had a massive impact on obviously the filmmaking industry and transformed it. And some in the early days thought it might be the end of the filmmaking craft. Actually, what happened was that the digital video technology suddenly began to offer filmmakers greater flexibility, better cost effectiveness, and accessibility, and was actually the beginning of mass adoption of film as a medium for recording of everyday life by the mass consumer markets. Next was the arrival of text messaging. So suddenly a new form of communication that wasn't voice, it was instant messages, and it disrupted again those voice calls. And for many generations, especially the youngers, became the preferred method of communication bar none. And if you ever tried to get your sort of teenage son or daughter on the phone, and they just text you back saying, what's up, then I'm sure you'll be familiar with how big of a change that was at the time. Then the internet came along in the early 1990s. So it was made public in 91, but it wasn't really until the late 90s, early 2000s that usage became widespread. And this was off the back of companies like Amazon, which launched and really transformed retail. So what did it offer? It offered choice and convenience in an unparalleled way. And obviously it was from the convenience of your own home. News outlets also were disrupted by online news. And so traditional media organizations suddenly didn't have the stranglehold on news, and so revolutionized how we access information, and in the wider context with Amazon, how we began to shop and consume media. Thank God Google arrived, because obviously the internet is full of information, but how do we search it? How do we retrieve information? And obviously their search engine enabled us to do it quickly and provided, efficient and targeted search queries, and really changed how we utilize the web. Before it was very much kind of islands, and if you knew about them, you knew about them, islands of information. But now, obviously, if you're, with your own websites, you'll be familiar with the need to have, search engine optimization, making sure that you rank for specific keywords, and that's all off the back of the original Google search engine. Now, YouTube launched in 2005 and transformed how we consume video content. So suddenly, all those people who'd been recording on video had a platform for that user-generated content. And what happened after this? Well, we began to have citizen journalism emerged, all the way up to the modern influencers who are telling stories about whatever's going on in their particular niche or industry. Next, it was social media in the mid-2000s. So again, how we can connect and share and communicate with other people. Those social dynamics really shifted, as well as communications patterns, off the back of obviously the most well-known being Facebook. But back in the day, there was Friendster, sort of some other lesser-known ones that sort of fell by the wayside. Blockchain technology more recently. So that's basically introducing that decentralized and immutable ledgers. And that's really interesting in that it might challenge how those traditional centralized banking systems operate, and obviously how we as consumers might be able to store and shift, transfer, I suppose, value or things that represent value through other means other than those banks. Now, all of these technologies at the time that they came out was seen as absolutely revolutionary. But the funny thing is they've all just now become part of our everyday lives, and most of them, we don't even think twice about them. And if you have a smartphone, like this one here, an Apple smartphone, actually everything that I've talked about is on your smartphone, and it's just part of our everyday life. And that kind of leads me to AI. Now, this is really currently representing the next frontier, in terms of technological advancement. And, we're talking about enabling machines to simulate human intelligence and perform cognitive tasks that we used to perform. So that's obviously a pretty scary idea, but don't worry, there's more to it than just sort of the Terminators taking over. And as Viv said, luckily we've got Andy, who is head of engineering, and so an expert in everything engineering and AI to kind of explain exactly what that means and what it is.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. In terms of AI as it's used currently, it's referring to computer algorithms that can effectively simulate human cognitive processes. So that's like learning, decision making, problem solving, and as we've seen more recently, even creativity, like generating art. And it's kind of this last and most human quality where generative AI comes into the picture. Generative AI is simply a branch of artificial intelligence. So we've actually been using artificial intelligence, for decades, actually. But what we've been able to do more recently is create AI that's capable of generating new data. So that can be text, that can be images, that can be video. I don't know if you've seen Sora, which is the recent demo, which you can basically tell it what to do and it creates a video for you of dolphins or animals running or whatever you want. And obviously other types of data as well. Now, generative models learn the patterns and the structure of their input training data. So essentially, if we want it to write text, we'll train it by showing it lots of text. If we want it to create video, we'll train it by showing it lots of video. And essentially, it then generates new data based on your prompt and based on its training data. Now, generative AI can be thought of as a machine learning model that is trained specifically to create new data. So rather than to make a prediction or to identify features of data, e.g. like, some programs would be like, oh, I want to find a particular type of tree, or I want to identify animals in these photos. Generative AI leverages the power of what's called large language models. So these are models effectively of lots and lots and lots of language. And essentially, we use machine learning and also neural networks to basically turn it into what's effectively like a silicon brain. So it's effectively like training it to act like a human brain. And that's how it can produce novel content. That's how it can mimic human creativity. The other big part of generative AI that has made just a massive difference to its, its use. Because obviously AI, as I already mentioned, has been used for decades, but you've got to be an engineer. You've got to be someone that can write code. You've got to have all this data and you've got to train it and you've got to teach it. Generative AI is different in the sense that no one trains it. No one says, hey, do this and do this and do this. We just dump data into it. And you'll see that different models have, like billions of, data points that are fed into them in order to get them to produce the results that they produce. But the other thing that's exciting is that rather than having to write code, we can prompt them. And that's the thing about, ChatGPT and Bard and all of these other platforms is it's the difference of you don't need someone like me to write code. You can just go, hey, generate me a picture of Mickey Mouse, write me a story about a troll living under a bridge. You can ask it to do whatever you want it to do, and it'll go, oh, yeah, I'll have a crack at that. And obviously, we'll get into more detail around prompting because it's one thing to say anyone can do it. It's another thing to actually enable anyone to do it.
So I think it's important to think about this, and we're sort of going down in a funnel to sort of, like, what is AI? What does it mean for your organization generally? And then we will look at, what it means from a marketing perspective. So just in terms of, what it might mean for your organization, and I'm sure many of you have probably logged, registered for other webinars where people have talked about this very, hey, what does it mean in general for organizations? And I think, a couple of things to think about here. And one is that, it is very much seen, especially in certain sectors or certain organizations, as a bit of a game changer. And for an example of that might be in software development, where these generative AIs can write enhanced software, and so we're looking at productivity increases. Some research has sort of said maybe upwards of 30 or 40%. Now, obviously, you can translate that across into your own firms, and you can see potential improvement for, decision making or productivity gains, or maybe even sort of around specific workflows. Now, as the technology advances, it does come with its own set of challenges. Big change is never necessarily comfortable, especially when it affects how people work. And I think if you think back to, the number of horses there were in New York before the Model T Ford came out, I think there were several million, 10, 15 years later, it was down to the sort of hundreds and thousands. And this is something that has been a little bit with AI. So in the US alone, over the last year and a bit, so since Q1 2023, there actually have been a huge amount of job losses, around about 330,000 just in those 14 months alone. And that's in the technology area, as basically companies said, look, we are seeing, or we're betting on productivity gains from this technology. And so we're going to exit people out, and especially in software, it was a lot around software engineers and maybe around support. So, as a result of this, there is a huge amount of retraining that's going on out there in the marketplace. So, there are a lot of people who are saying, okay, well, look, if I am going to make sure that I'm future-proofed in a lot of, I suppose, white collar professional organizations, then I do need to know about AI. I need to know how to use it. And then, as Andy said, maybe, or thank goodness, that's as simple as, knowing how to prompt it and how to sort of integrate it within your particular workplace. So in terms of, accountants, you guys are obviously involved a lot with data and information. So, thankfully, a lot of apps out there are building in AI into some of their platforms, and obviously that's what we're doing as well. And look, and I suppose the upside here as an accountant is, it will enable you hopefully to improve productivity, and ultimately hopefully deliver greater value to your clients. And if you're just thinking about it from a use of data perspective, then that's great. Yes, there might be the odd thing like in terms of privacy that you need to look out for, but the data is the data, and AI can work with the data. When it comes to marketing, you do need to be a little bit more careful about it, just because, as Andy said, you can prompt it you can prompt the AI to have a crack at something and it will do its best, but it's only doing its best. So when you are generating ideas or content, you do need to be aware of the fact that there are some limitations.
Yes, I mean, essentially, this is looking at the challenges to consider when adopting AI and using it more widely. So the AI data risks, as Charlie said, we can look at data and we can analyze it, but you also want to ask the question of where is that data going? Who has access to that data? Are you okay with that data getting out? So knowing where your AI data is going and who has access to it is crucial. There are a lot of cases now where you can self-host it. So whether that's self-hosted in the cloud or self-hosted locally, there are options for making sure that you control your data, but it's something to be aware of, to think, hey, wait a minute, where's this data going? Who has access to it? Hallucinations are essentially what Charlie was alluding to at the end there, talking about the fact that sometimes it will just make stuff up. So AI will go, oh yeah, I think this is the answer. And because it's trained to write really good sentences, it can sound really plausible. And so you've got to be careful, and you've got to realize that it can generate you amazing content, but you've got to make sure that it is actually quality content. There is what a lot of the AI companies are working on currently is artificial general intelligence, which is kind of like the next step above what we have now with generative AI. And what that is going to be is actual intelligence and knowing what is real and true, knowing what's made up and false, and can actually apply real world logic. So it can actually look at what it's generating and decide, hey, is this actually truthful? And there are actually some companies that are already doing this around research. So if you're researching into research papers and stuff like that, it can actually go, hey, here's some proof, and it will actually link to things. So that is actually progressing. Machines talking to machines, well, essentially this is, where's the oversight? And this is one of the challenges with the AI models, which is we don't necessarily know what's happening in there. And if you've got one AI program talking to another AI program that's talking to another AI program, how do we know what they're doing? So a little bit like the Terminator, how do we know if they're not plotting against us? So that's kind of the issue with machines talking to machines. And the AI black box model is essentially, models are proprietary. We don't actually know what they've been trained on. So companies don't produce a list of, hey, these are all the websites or these are all the documents that we trained our data on, i.e., what is the model? What is the data that's underlying the AI? Equally, because it's essentially silicon, a silicon brain, we can't actually see what's going on there. So when you see in the media then saying, oh, AI is a black box, it actually literally is a black box. We don't know exactly how it's deciding why it's going to write what it does. And obviously, again, companies are working on this to have both that oversight and that ability to go, oh, this is why ChatGPT has produced this result. This is why Copilot has told you to do it this way rather than that way. But all of these things right now are areas that you've got to be aware of, and you've got to kind of work out, hey, can I trust this? Can I not trust this? What's the output that I should be worried about? And lastly, AI and job concerns, as Charles has already alluded to. Obviously, there's lots of engineers that have lost jobs. There's lots of support people that have lost jobs. But equally, AI can be used to make people's jobs more interesting. It's amazing at analyzing data and going, hey, rather than you having to read this 60-page article, the AI can read it. It can summarize it. You can go and check key points based on its summary. So while I think there's no doubt that in the next 5 to 10 years, the job marketplace is going to look very different, I think there's lots of ways that AI can improve it. But the reality is, we don't know. Jason Huang, who's the founder of NVIDIA that makes a lot of the chips that do AI, the H100 and the H200 chips, he said, hey, people don't need to learn to code anymore. Whereas historically, all tech leaders have said, teach your kids to code. Because he's like, well, we can prompt now. You don't actually have to be able to write code. So that's a pretty big sea change. So I think it's worth, as Charles already mentioned, staying ahead of the stuff and working out, hey, where's my industry going? Where should I be moving? What should I be training myself in?
So just from an AI and marketing perspective, I just allude to a post I saw that Jason Stats talked about AI and whether accountants should be worried about it. His key takeaway is that, look, there are lots of tasks anyway that are on their way to being, automated or limited that accountants do. The nice thing though is that there are many, many things that accountants do, and while some of them might be knocked off by automation or AI or sort of made so efficient as to, not require a human input, because of the variety, it's unlikely to knock out everything. So as Andy said, good to keep an eye on where AI is going for you personally, but also for you as an accountant in terms of your firm. What does that mean in terms of the services that you offer? Compliance versus, say, moving more into that advisory space. So AI specifically for marketing, mostly we think about the use of ChatGPT, and that's particularly, around the text generation. And in 2022, that's when OpenAI released ChatGPT, and it sort of was the biggest software release ever. I think it had 100 million users within, a matter of months. So I'm sure most of you are aware of it. There are some alternatives. Andy sort of mentioned Microsoft Copilot. Obviously, Google has Gemini and Bard. So, the nice thing is that, there's not just one game in town. You can go and find alternatives that maybe suit your needs better, depending on what you want them for. I had a bit of fun with this next slide, and I actually asked ChatGPT, what are some of the challenges? And this isn't necessarily to scare people or turn people off, generative AI. Look, I mean, we're all in on it. I mean, we've got it in our platform now. I think it's just to give a bit of context about what it is good at, and maybe some of the things that you need to be aware of that might not be so good at. So this is what it came back. I'm just going to focus on a couple which I think are most relevant to you. So the first one is lacking real world experience. And it really does. It doesn't understand the real world. It doesn't have any contextual awareness. So as Andy said, it can generate amazing sounding sentences based on language patterns, but it doesn't actually genuinely comprehend a situation. So I think that's a big one. Secondly, is that it can generate incorrect information. Whatever the data was that it was trained on, and the patterns that it sort of that it creates, it doesn't always provide accurate information. So, when it has to be right, it has to be accurate, you have to have specific knowledge. Again, that's just something to consider. Incoherent or unnatural responses. I mean, I definitely do think, I've heard this said by a number of people, that they can actually tell if an entire piece of content has been written by generative AI and then sort of hasn't had anyone go through and maybe edit it or fine tune it. It can seem a bit repetitive. It can seem a little bit unnatural. So that's something to think about there. Vulnerability to offensive content. Yes, it can, show bias. It can be offensive. It's just a fact that, there are biases that may be present in the data that it was trained on. And so, if you are creating content, especially from scratch, you have to read through it and you have to be aware that they might exist. And so you need to monitor or maybe go in and mitigate it. Difficulty handling complex queries and multi-term conversations, which I'm sure is something that many of you have with your clients all the time. So deep reasoning is not something that it really has at the moment. It doesn't understand the sort of the long-term context. So great for short and simple interactions, but the longer, more complex ones, it really is limited. Limited domain specificity, and I think this is a classic one for the accounting sector. So it knows a lot about a lot of things. So it has a wide breadth of information, but it's not particularly deep, depending on what it was trained on. So, you can't get much more specific than the conversations that you'll be having with your clients or your small business clients about, various aspects of their individual business in a specific market, in a specific industry. And so again, ChatGPT knows a lot of things about a lot of different things, but not necessarily very much. Again, misinformation, misinterpretation, and Andy and I have experienced this a lot of times. We'll put in a prompt which we think is pretty straightforward, and it does misinterpret them, or it does come back with incorrect information. So again, just be aware of that. And then the last one, which Andy highlighted, is people have put in information into ChatGPT and other generative AI tools, which has then been available sort of in a wider context, like the information has leaked. So again, if you're asking it to do something very simple and straightforward with no proprietary data or information, you're probably going to be fine. If you're sort of popping in without the appropriate safeguards, one of your clients, tax returns or something like that, then again, you have to understand, what are the safeguards of that information in the particular system that you're using. And I think this is just quite a funny look at what, with the best of intentions, can go not necessarily wrong, but just sort of shows some of the idiosyncrasies with generative AI. And this was Pack and Save, but it was picked up in the UK. And they Pack and Save has basically had a savvy meal bot. And you sort of go in and you put a few different options for maybe what you want to eat. And it will then sort of create a recipe. And it did create some recipes, including recipes for chlorine gas, poison bread sandwiches, and mosquito repellent roast potatoes. So that's, when people were adding different grocery items into the list, some of which were obviously non-grocery items. They were still available at the supermarket, but they may have been sort of like, fly spray or rat poison. So it didn't understand, again, that contextual understanding or ethical understanding. It didn't understand that what it was spitting out, the information it was spitting out, was actually going to be very damaging. So again, the limitations in this story here is not to frighten you away from using AI tools. It's just to convey the certain limitations, and also, say that when you use it, you use it as a tool and use it carefully. And if you do use it in those ways to sort of enhance what you have, or as a productivity tool, then it really is fantastic. And some of those ways that it can be helpful, 4 or 5 things that's really useful for. So brainstorming topic ideas. So you might be having trouble coming up with some ideas, whether it's for blog ideas or ideas for an event, or it could be anything. You can put a prompt in there and say, hey, give me some ideas. I'm an accountant and I want to run a live event, and I'm inviting a specific subset of my clients, their retailers. Give me some ideas for what I should call it, or things that we should discuss. Overcoming writer's block. Obviously, that's one that a lot of people struggle with. There's very few of us who are sort of natural born writers or who have the time to do it. But again, AI could, you could ask it to provide you with an outline of something you want to write, or even you could ask it to create some content, which then you can go and edit and sort of build out based off of the first draft that they've done. You can also use it to proofread, and that's one of the ones you can do in BOMA. You can write something and then say, hey, can you go through it, proofread the grammar, make sure the spelling's right, make sure it makes sense, and it will actually come back and suggest improvements there. Again, rewriting current material. So a classic one, and one that we'll show a little bit later on, is that you may have a piece of content and say, look, I want to change the tone because it's a bit, we'd like to have a little bit more formal tone than the one in the current article. Or maybe you want to make it more engaging, or maybe you'd like to make it, maybe you'd like to summarize something. AI is perfect at all of this because it's basically taking content that is there that is correct, if there in fact are factual elements in there, and you're just asking it to use its natural language programming to improve it. And then the last one, I think, as I said, in those limitations, it's great at the sort of straightforward linear short form content. So if you're thinking, introductions to a paragraph, or summaries, or even sort of social posts, and again, you're having a bit of a writer's block about sort of how to make up a really jazzy sounding, fun sounding social post, you can ask it to do that and it will do it. And again, you're able to then come in and be, I suppose, the voice of moderation. Is it too jazzy? Do you want to go a little bit further? Does it have all the information you want in there? And again, it really does, act as a massive time saver, and probably for many people, especially if you're doing social media for your firm, and that it sort of has to be outwards and engaging, and it's kind of 4 o'clock on a Friday night, and you're just not feeling it. It can be, it sort of can act as another sort of team member. Really useful one.
Yeah, I mean, being able to effectively use generative AI is good prompts are just so crucial. Now, here's basically 5 really powerful tips that you can use to improve the quality of the content you produce. So be detailed and provide context. So this one is actually the most important. So this is about saying, hey, if you just ask ChatGPT, say, write me an article that will help my business clients, it doesn't really give it a lot of context. So it might come up with something useful. It might come up with something that's completely irrelevant. So it's really about saying the more detail you can provide, the better. So if you can explain the goal for the content, if you can just describe the outcome and any relevant data or even links that it could read, then it can respond much more powerfully. Now, obviously, we're going to do a demo very, very shortly. So we'll take you through some of those prompts. But essentially, you can talk about like the industry that you're communicating to into the piece that you're writing. You can talk about your company and your brand, like, are you more formal? Are you more fun? Like what's your kind of brand? One of the things that I do with prompts, because obviously I've been using them a lot over the last year, is essentially I have like a prompts document where I just save my prompts, and essentially you can have a base prompt that you work from that says, hey, I'm a this and this is what I do, and today I'm writing I'd like you to write a content piece about yada yada yada. So it's not like you have to come up with this every time. It's good to build this up and then reuse it in the future. Specific questions is really about the better quality and quantity of your questions will give you a better response. So when you're doing marketing prompt, again, be specific. So instead of saying, what should I do for my next marketing campaign? That's pretty generic. You'd be better off going, hey, what kind of email campaign would work well for a SaaS company that's marketing to C-level executives? Or in your case, it might be like, hey, I'm an accountant. I work with small and medium businesses, under 25 staff. What would be some ideas for content I could provide to my clients? So that'd be a good way of starting a brainstorming session. Different approaches is a good way. So often, as Charles already mentioned, we sometimes prompt something and we go, oh, what's that about? So often it's about just trying a slightly different way, wording your question slightly differently. And instead of just going, because you can hit the try again button, but instead of hitting the try again button, you can actually ask the question in a slightly different way, or say, hey, try again, but use a more professional tone. And essentially, the more detailed your instructions are, the better it helps the generative AI understand what you're looking for and helps lead to more effective and targeted responses. And lastly, we're banging on the same drum again, but essentially, we want to make sure that the reply it gives us is valid. Like we want to look at it, we want to check it, we want to make sure the tone is right for our business, and we want to make sure it's accurate, i.e. it's not writing something that actually doesn't make sense. Now, if you're a BOMA user, then you will have already experienced some AI across our system, like we've been using it in our chatbots for the past year and the support center. But integrated AI is now being rolled out within BOMA itself. The first place it is in the branded web page editor and also in the email editor. And essentially, this is going to enable you to easily customize any of the articles in the BOMA content library. And obviously, that's a massive deal because I know for a lot of accountants, they're like, but I don't want to have content that's like everyone else's, but I also don't necessarily have time to rewrite the content. Well, hey, guess what? Now you don't have to. This is going to enable you to easily customize articles in the BOMA content library. You can ask it to change the tone. You can ask it to summarize an article. You can change the headlines. And I think in our experience, the opportunity is to utilize, AI like ChatGPT is to produce less technical content, so it's not to produce the super technical content that you could with your 25 or 30 years experience in the business. It's more about, hey, what data, what knowledge might generative AI have that it could write about? And again, we'll show that in the demo in just a second. And I think that's the thing with ChatGPT, using that kind of more basic content makes sense. It avoids its inherent limitations. You're not having to pre-prompt it with so much data to get it to write about it. Instead, it's a lot easier to use. Longer term at BOMA, we want to do more analysis of your campaigns. So the ability in BOMA to go, hey, you ran this campaign, it was really successful. Here's what we can see from the stats. You should run a similar campaign to this. Also, the ability to suggest like different content of like, hey, here's our different content pillars. What about something like this based on how your previous campaigns have performed? Okay, so I'm going to start on the dashboard just for anyone that hasn't seen BOMA before. So BOMA is lets you deliver email, social media. So basically it's a marketing and a comms tool for your business. The key part of it is, as Viv's already been talking about, is the content library. So we've got like content from us, content from other partners, and obviously a large portion, if you're a GAP member, is you've got all of your GAP content in there as well, which is amazing. Now, I could take one of these and I could deliver it in a campaign. I could send it to Zapier, which will send it to your website. But what I'm going to do for the start of this demo is I'm actually going to start like from scratch a branded web page. Now, a branded web page is something that we've added to BOMA that lets you create a web page. It looks like your website. It's got your logo at the top. It's got your brand colors on it. And you might kind of go, oh, wouldn't I want to send them to my website? Well, look, some of our users do. And some of our users are like, I just want to be able to do everything in one place. I want to make everything as easy and as fast as possible. And so they love the ability in BOMA of being able to create a web page. But you can absolutely put content on your own website, and we'll get into later on how to do that in this campaign. But essentially, I'm going to write a page here, or rather the AI is going to write a page here for me called 7 Strategies to Better Manage Your Staff. Right, let's start off that as a working title. And essentially I put the title in first, then I click Edit Article. It's going to pull that title into it so that I don't have to type it again, and it uses that for the summary, for the SEO. Essentially, I'm going to load an image here because obviously you want to have your own images in here. We've got millions of images in our library, multiple places you can access it, the email editor, the branded web page editor, and also within the campaigns themselves. I could search the free photos, but I think we're pushing up on time, so I'm going to choose a photo that I picked out earlier. Now, when I click on this box here, basically on the right-hand side, it says Write with AI. And very important, like over here on the left, you've got this blue box that shows you what ChatGPT is going to know about when I ask it to write content. So if I was going to ask it to rewrite this headline, I would click on this and then I'd click Write with AI, and we can see how that's highlighted with blue. This is what it's going to know about when I start writing. That'll become more important as we get into the email, but I just want to introduce it now. So I can click Write with AI. I can click here. There's a bunch of stuff that we've got built in. So as Charles already mentioned, correct grammar mistakes in the content, make it tone without changing the format, so we can make it more fun, more engaging. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in a prompt that I prepared earlier. So it says, you're an accountant with small business clients. Write a 700-word article for your clients on 7 strategies for better managing their staff in their small business. So it's the 7 strategies to better manage your staff. So I'm going to click generate. So ChatGPT is going to start working on that. So it's actually writing it. So like a word at a time, it's writing it. So it's not immediate, doesn't produce it immediately. But look, it's very fast. It hasn't taken long to come in and write that. And I'm going to look at this and go, okay, what's it saying to do to better manage your staff? So clearly define roles and responsibilities, communicate openly, honestly, training and development, goals and objectives, recognize and reward hard work, positive work environment, lead by example. Okay, great. I'm really happy with this generation. This looks really good. So I can click apply, and then I can close that box, and then it's going to bring it into my branded web page. So basically, I've written a whole blog post in like 30 seconds. I'm also going to take this introduction paragraph from here. So I'm now going to save and close that article, and I'm going to come back out here. And so this is your social summary. So I'm going to take that text and put it in there so that I haven't had to write that social summary myself. Again, ChatGPT has done it for me. If I wanted to rework that, I could have highlighted that text and reworked it in ChatGPT. But I think what we'll do is we'll continue now, and it's going to load and build up my campaign. So basically, I've started from a branded web page. Equally, it could have been a page on your website that you link to, like a blog post. And then it's going to take that and it's going to generate all of my channels so that I can easily and quickly send it out. So it's got my LinkedIn, it's got me personally, it's got my X, it's got Facebook, and it's got email, obviously, as well. Now, what I'm going to do for my email is I'm going to take this article, and I could choose like a branded template with like the full article. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to build a newsletter article here for you guys so you can see, how you can use the generative AI in different ways. So I'm going to choose intro plus hero. That's going to bring an introduction to that article in as a hero at the top of my email. So there's my logo, there's my article. And at this point, I might go, okay, great. Now what I want to do is I'm going to add some more content from the content library. I'm going to bring in a gap article. It's remembered that I've looked at the gap earlier. I could look at all my libraries if I wanted to, but actually I'm going to pick a gap piece. I quite like this managing risk one. I'm going to bring that in as well. So, and I'm going to, again, I could bring it in as the same kind of hero image, but actually I'm going to make this the feature of the email. And then I'm going to bring in another one like this. And if I wanted to, I could go, oh, managing risk, let's rewrite that. So I can click on this and I can say, hey, give me 3 different options for this headline. And hopefully, always with demos, so it's going to come back and it's going to say, hey, risk management strategies, effective risk mitigation, risk control techniques. So maybe I like this one. I'm not going to bring in all 3. I'm just going to copy the one I want. I'm going to click in here and I'm going to paste it in there. And this point, maybe I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to actually add some more content. I'm going to add a website URL and I'll go and grab, so this is just a website URL that I prepared earlier. It's just on our website, but this is where you'd share like an article from your website. So let's say one of your coworkers has written an article. You go, great, go and grab that, bring that into the email. Again, I've got all my different formats. I could bring it in as a hero, but I'm going to leave the hero as the hero, and I'm going to bring this in again as an image left. And again, if I wanted to, I'm like, oh, actually, this is a bit long. So maybe I'm going to bring it in and go, can you rewrite this to make it more engaging? And we'll see what it comes up with, to see if it comes up with like a sort of a, so sometimes it will do this, sometimes it'll just go, yeah, there we go. So it's thinking it's a BOMA technique, but I'm like, I'm just going to change it to master networking skills. And this is an example where it's like, well, you want to actually look at what it's saying and look at what it's coming back with. And that's not really what I want it to do. Obviously, if I wasn't in a demo situation like this, I might try and prompt it a bit more differently to get it to come back with some more creative titles. But equally, it's a headline. It's faster for me to just edit it in that case. Now, was there anything else, Charles, that you wanted me to cover? Like in terms of, like, obviously we could rewrite these. We wouldn't use it really to write an introduction. Like inside of BOMA, we do have like placeholder rows. So if I want to do an introduction at the top, I can drag in this dear first name and I can write this myself. I could try and prompt the AI to do that, but probably realistically, it's a bit nicer to personalize it, write it myself, and just mention the articles that are in this week's newsletter or this month's newsletter, depending on what my sending frequency is.
Yeah, no, so look, Andy, I think it was great. And the only thing I would say, again, because this was a demo when Andy prompted the 7 strategies to better manage your staff, if we were going to put that onto a website proper or sort of send it up proper, we probably would spend a few minutes going through and making sure that, all the, if there's any examples we wanted to add or any sort of keywords or things like that, just to kind of, take it from being like, 7 out of 10 in terms of quality right up that last few percent to sort of make it unique to your business, to your clients. Again, AI on these general topics, plus a little bit of input from yourself is always better than, just straight AI on its own. Because again, remember, it doesn't have context, it doesn't have the real world experience. So if you can just spend a couple of minutes, if you have the time, taking that content, if it's the long form content, and just tweaking it to make sure that it really hits all your, sort of specific brandy tone guidelines, that will, improve it even more. But I think that's about it. So it is live in BOMA. So if you're a BOMA user, you'll already see this in your account. And if you're not and you want to give BOMA a try, you'll see it when you try. But look, I'll take back control, Andy, and then we can just finish off with next steps and a few questions. Love you to take a trial of the Gap. You get 30 days, and obviously you can sign up for a free trial or book a demo, and you'll have one of the team take you through it. And equally likewise with BOMA, it's a slightly shorter time frame. It's a 14-day free trial. Again, you can sign up on our website or book a demo. And if you are a subscriber of BOMA already and you have questions about using Content Assist, just reach out to us via support and we can give you a demo of it sort of in person. But look, Viv, should we go to questions?
Yep,
and I think
absolutely.
A few have come through.
A couple have come through in Q&A. How do you add the gap content to your BOMA account. Well, to use the GAP's premium content with your BOMA platform, you need to be a GAP subscriber and you need to unlock that premium content. So make sure you put that in your exit survey, and someone will come back to you if we need to. And then there's also a couple of firms who would like a bit of a demo on what you've been, a bit of a deeper demo on what you've been showing us here today, Charles and Andy. So once again, slip that into the exit survey. And any other questions, pop it into the chat pane or directly into the Q&A. I'm sure you've got some questions, but this is really exciting, Charles, you know, really.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're very excited to get in there, and not only because you know, look, everyone, if they can, is having some sort of AI in their platform, whether it's kind of useful or not. In our case, because we're dealing with content and it's a generative AI tool, there's a complete match for kind of, it actually is incredibly useful. And, you know, as Andy said, you don't need to be a specialist kind of engineer or AI prompter or have sort of done a degree in kind of understanding AI. You know, as an accountant or any member of an accounting firm, you've got the experience to understand who your clients are. You can see the content if you're using, say, GAP or BOMA content, you know, and you already have enough experience to take that and use the AI to sort of to best effect, you know, as Andy showed, you know, alternative title suggestions or summarizations, or even coming up with that more basic content. I think I'll just, you know, reiterate what Viv said, and again off some of those limitations. You know, where AI is not good is on that technical contextual information. Luckily, you've got the GAP and BOMA for that, because, you know, the content libraries have all that contextual you know, technical information in there. So we see it as hopefully a really useful, you know, addition to the platform, and hopefully one that GAPpies will find useful as well.
Yeah, just one other question from Vanita, which I was going to answer live. So Vanita's asked, like, the branded web page, where does this live, and why would someone create this versus using their own website? So it's hosted on a BOMA subdomain, Vanita, and essentially users use it for convenience. So, you know, we have loads of users that put everything on their website, but equally we have loads of users that use the branded web page. And I think it's really funny because I think both audiences cannot understand the other audience. So the users who are using their website cannot understand why people would host it on BOMA, and the people that use BOMA cannot understand why they do it on their website. It's just ease and convenience. We do have a project that's in the final stages now as a follow-up from the AI to allow people to customize that branded URL. So let's say that your business is called Red Office, then your domain name would become redoffice.goboma.com. So it would be like a branded domain name, or a branded subdomain, I should say. So a branded subdomain that would only be yours, that only you would use. And so essentially that's something that we're looking at adding for people that want something that's kind of in between what we have right now and what, you know, and pushing it out to their website. Because obviously, even if you have Zapier, it still is a lot more work to push it out to your website. Obviously, if you have, like, say, ChatGPT built into your website, then you could just write a blog post straight on your website. And then in BOMA, you could very easily do a web URL share, and then you could share it that way. So it does depend what you're working on and what your processes are. But yes, people just do it for ease and convenience, and they don't want to go and do stuff on their website. You know,
right.
And that's their choice.
Thanks, Andy. Guys, we're out of time. It's been fabulous having you here. I know this is just the beginning of this particular deeper AI journey for BOMA. So well done for getting this product out. Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Get that exit survey complete. Make sure you reach out to somebody at BOMA for a deeper demo. Talk to us if you want to talk about our content and our platform. Have a great rest of the afternoon, everyone, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.